We should be good to go. You can take it away, Kate.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wonderland Trail and either how you should or shouldn't approach the Wonderland Trail, depending on how you look at it. So for those who aren't familiar with the Wonderland Trail, it's a roughly 90-mile route that goes around Mt Rainier. I'm going to get up close and personal with it. It is this green trail that wanders its way around the mountain. And how long did I spend planning doing the Wonderland Trail in this 90 miles? Roughly 24 hours. And I did not live particularly close to Mt Rainier at the time. Now I live within, eyesight of Mt Rainier. At the time, I lived in Tucson, Arizona, and had been training for the past year for the Fat Dog 120 up in Canada. I drove up, and around the time that I got to my coach's house in Renton, the race got canceled due to wildfires, and I decided that I could not drive 1,600 miles without doing something epic with my training time, because if anybody has ever trained in the desert in the summer, you don't want to waste that time. Nobody trains in Tucson in the summer. That's our off season. So my two options that I came up with were either to do the Essie Alps 100 or to do the Wonderland Trail. My coach is George Orozco, who came up with the Essie Alps 100, and he suggested that I not do that. So I did that this year, and thought that the Wonderland would be a better idea instead. So I picked a bunch of blackberries with my friend Yitka, and we made jam, and I went to the grocery store, bought tortillas, peanut butter, cheese, and jelly, and made a bunch of roll-ups and brought along some Cliff Bars and packed my bag and parked at White River, which is right here. So that took me roughly 24 hours to pack what I had and put all of that together. I read the .gov description of the Wonderland. I had been on roughly 2 miles of the Wonderland before, and my experience of that was that it was kind of flat and rolling and lovely. And so in my mind, I had this idea that it was going to be, 40 hours strolling through the woods around Mt Rainier. That's not exactly what the Wonderland Trail is. So I will show you more of what it actually is. All right. So starting at White River, I did know ahead of time that, one, I did not have to carry a lot of water with me because there was going to be plenty of naturally occurring water sources on course. And after chatting with George, decided that I was not going to bring along a filter. I don't necessarily recommend that to anyone unless they feel comfortable with that. But I did not use a filter during it, and there's a lot of naturally occurring water. I did know that a lot of the rivers were very high at the time, and that would be a potential challenge along the way. About a week before, somebody had drowned doing a river crossing, so I needed to be aware of potentially high rivers during the attempt. I did this in August 2018, and day one was super sunny. This is starting at White River. Started at about 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and the first 30 or 35 miles is about what everyone would want to have as a 50K. So that's from roughly White River down to Longmire. You head up into Summerland, have all of your Sound of Music dreams that happen here. And if we want to look at where we are in the elevation profile, this is where we started, right around White River. Head up into Summerland and down into Indian Bar, which is where we're at in that picture right now. Head down into Maple Creek and Box Canyon, and then eventually have a nice long downhill into Longmire. Come back. There you go. This was really exciting because in the desert, you don't see or hear very much running water, and you certainly don't get to cross, glacier paths or see snow in the middle of summer. So I did a lot of like skipping and singing and taking pictures of my friends, the marmots. I was really sad that I did not see any bighorn sheep or mountain goats while I was up there. But other than that, there was not much to be upset about. There is a little bit of snow to cross, not enough to need any sort of technical gear at that time of year. Obviously, I was not in a big hurry, taking a lot of pictures along the way there. There are some places of fallen debris. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of reconstruction that's necessary this year after all of the landslides and everything. But in general, the trail is very well marked and has been exceptionally well maintained, other than a few landslide areas that can be a little bit tricky to cross. This is going over to Reflection Lake. All right, so this is after reaching Longmire and heading over to the other side and first sunset. So I made pretty good time on the first day. And so I decided to take a nap around 19 hours in, and then another short nap right at the top of this little peak right here. Since I only had 24 hours of planning, I did not do a permit. It's a continuous movement event. And so I just used my emergency bivvy alongside the trail. And when I woke up on this ridge line, it was hailing and I was covered in snow compared to the 80 degrees that it was the day before. So day 2 looked mostly like this if I could see the trees. So I did not see Mt Rainier on day 2. So looking back at our elevation profile, it's easy to look at numbers and not necessarily think about what they mean. So there's roughly somewhere between 25 and 30,000 gain, depending on how exactly you decide to do this course, which is roughly 650 feet of elevation gain per mile, or loss per mile. And you pretty much feel like you're either going up Mount Si or down Mount Si the whole time. Now that I do live in this area, that's a fairly decent comparison. Although some of the downhills, especially if it is raining and hailing the whole time, are a little less runnable going back down. So at the same time, even though it was very rainy, it was very pretty on the second day, just a lot slower than I had anticipated. My original goal time-wise going into it was to do it in about 40 hours. And because that was what my goal was for Fat Dog. I did learn along the way that it was a lot harder to convince myself to not take a nap or to have continuous forward motion without having an aid station or something that I was looking forward to. Because they're really, you know, you're just kind of looking forward to the next point on the map. And once your phone or GPS dies, then you're not really looking forward to a point on the map anymore, especially if it's raining. So, so it did take me a little bit longer than I anticipated once I got into the second day and it was raining a lot. So at this point, we're sliding up and down all of these peaks and valleys. Then the one difference that I made to the traditional trails, I took the spray park option, which takes off a mile or two, but gives you a little bit more gain and then connects you back into the Carbon River area. So as opposed to the traditional route, where you keep going around Mowich Lake over to Isput Pass. You take this cutoff here and then go up into Spray Park. And George had recommended that to me because it's a really gorgeous area. And I agree now that I've gotten to actually see it as opposed to just going through that into a torrential downpour. At this point, when I was going up through this area, my little Gaia app that I had downloaded right before starting the course told me that I had roughly 15 miles left to go. I didn't realize at the time that it was kind of as the crow flies that it was going to tell me my point, my distance back to the starting point. And so I really believed that if I could just make it off of the Carbon Glacier area, then I would be able to just run back home and I would be done in about 38 hours. That is not what happened. So I got down through Echo Cliffs right as the sun set, and this next section has a lot of river crossings, and doing those in the dark after it had been raining all day the day before was very challenging. If I were to send somebody back out there to be doing night crossings, especially if you know that there aren't going to be a lot of other people around, I would say to definitely have a waist light because your headlamp will not be sufficient to help guide you through rain and to find safe passages across all of the river crossings. I did have a handheld flashlight as well. And every time I would come to a river crossing, I would have to kneel down with the light and scan back and forth until I could find where I thought the trail might continue on the other side. And after about 40 hours of being out there, it was definitely a scary and a mentally draining place to be, especially when you know that you don't necessarily have cell service or a way to get out of there if you make a poor decision. So the way that I dealt with that is that every time I would get to the other side of a river crossing, I would go about a mile and I would lay down and I would take a 2-minute nap until I started shivering in my emergency bivvy, and then I would get up and I would go to the next river crossing and I would start the same thing again. It's the only time that I have ever been angry at a mountain. Like, I can't really describe how how alive the mountain felt at that time. And so Mount Rainier and I fought all night on night number 2. And then the sun came out in the morning, and I got to see the prettiest sunrise of my life going over sunrise. And I do not have a picture of that because my phone was dead at this point. But it will always be part of my memory. And from there, got to jog down into White River, finished in just shy of 48 hours. Although if you want a true car to car time, I did get lost in the parking lot trying to find my car, which took me about another 5 or 10 minutes. So that was the end of getting around Wonderland. I then drove halfway back down the mountain and took a nap alongside the road once I got into cell service to let people know that I was alive, and then got to celebrate with my dear friends George and Yitka over beer, cider, and ice cream. And so all was well. And that is Wonderland 2018. So things that I would potentially do different next time. Now that I know the trail better, I would either split it into a 3-day run. I think that it's really naturally designed as a 3-part run. From if you start at White River, which I think is a great place to get started, going from there down to Longmire, or roughly from Longmire up to Mowich, and then Mowich back to White River is a pretty natural way to get it done. It is a really sad trail to do in the dark, not necessarily because it's particularly dangerous or scary to do in the dark, but because there's so much to see and so many things that you miss by moving when it is dark out. And so if I were to go back and do it, I would either do it that way, or I would push myself to go a little bit faster and hope that I didn't run into some of the same deep river crossings and weather that can get involved with that. But I certainly don't regret doing it the way that I did it. I think that sometimes you have to do spontaneous adventures in a way that you don't plan. And that as long as you have all of the tools and the grit necessary to do it, then you'll end up getting a lot more out of the experience. So anyway, so that is the Wonderland.
You are amazing. It's so, I don't know, amazing to me to think about just like switching and doing such an enormous trail within 24 hours of planning to do something else. I guess you like had all your food and gear and everything all packed and prepared for Fat Dog already.
Yeah, fortunately, Fat Dog requires a lot of survival gear, and so I was already prepared to take a lot of things with me. You certainly could add a lot more amenities to your time out there. You kind of choose your own level of discomfort that you're willing to be in. But yeah, I was lucky that I had already picked a race that required me to bring a lot of things up there.
Mm-hmm. Where did you say you were living at the time? Tucson?
Tucson, Arizona.
Are there many hills there?
Yeah, Tucson is, it's essentially in a basin that is surrounded by mountains on all sides.
Cool. I wondered, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to live in a place now where the desert does not try to kill me every day.
Does anyone else have some questions?
I just think it's like terrifying to think about running by myself at night on that trail. So like, what did you do to prepare for that? Or do you have any like mental tips or tricks or things you do to just like overcome that fear? I feel like I just like the idea of venturing like going woods night by yourself? No, never. And particularly like as a female, I feel kind of conditioned to not do that.
Yeah. So a couple of things. My first real experience with running through the night was starting to do some of the 200-mile races, doing Bigfoot 200 and Tahoe 200. And then that's a really pleasant way to start running overnight because you know that you have friends on the trail ahead of you. You have a definite point where you're looking ahead. I would say that doing this big of a solo trip is a little bit different mentally. And so having, something that you can hear, like for me, if my phone doesn't die, it's nice to hear a podcast or to hear voices overnight. So sometimes if I don't have that, I'll sing to myself. But yeah, we're really our own biggest enemies in that sort of way. Another thing that I think really combats fear is your level of personal preparation in terms of being able to defend yourself. I'm a women's self-defense instructor in my not so spare time. And then that was something that I got into knowing that I was starting to do a lot of these, very long solo type of events. And so, finding out how to defend yourself from human predators, I think is also a big skill, especially for women, that gives you empowerment. And also that there's nothing wrong with recruiting crazy friends. Like, we live in an area where we have lots of crazy friends who can come with us on these things, and that's not a bad option either.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go the direction you went, Kate?
Because George told me to.
Fair enough.
No. So the biggest reason that I decided to go that way is that I wanted to do Summerland at the beginning. And I wanted to go through Spray Park in that direction. That that now that I've done Spray Park, both directions, it is a more natural approach to that aspect. I did meet one other person on the trail who was run hiking at about the same pace, and she was going the opposite direction around it. So people do, definitely go both directions when they're doing this route.
Would you still go the same way with all those river crossings towards the end?
Then that's a really good question. I would really try and time it so that I could do that part in daylight. And that's a big reason why I would either push to go faster if that was possible, or I would split it into the 3 days.
All right.
And you encountered all the river crossings right around Spray Park, right? At the end of that?
Yeah, after coming down into the Carbon River area.
Okay.
There are river crossings. There were river crossings on the first day, but none of those were an issue because it was a bright sunny day. And so it was, the rivers were lower on the first day.
I feel like my memory, was that odd for that year? Because I feel like my memory is I just don't remember those big river crossings there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the big concern of that particular year.
Okay.
And so I was glad that I had looked at the trip reports in that aspect.
Okay. Interesting. Did I write anything else? I was going to look back through your notes that you sent me, Kate. Oh, did you do any training for the sleep deprivation? Because I guess it's different in that fat dog. Well, even at 40 hours, that's like a really long time to be awake.
So as far as sleep deprivation training,
Yeah.
I mean, my job is a little bit of sleep deprivation training. I'm an ambulatory veterinarian, so I work a long on-call shift. But in general, I don't believe in doing a lot of deprived training. That we should most focus on really getting good sleep before going into something like this. And it probably isn't the best to drive 1,600 miles and then decide to, go do this. But such is life. It's just another piece of it. I think everybody handles sleep deprivation differently. And the more events that you do where you have to figure out your sleep patterns, the better. So like the running the 200s was definitely helpful in planning for that. But I also didn't intend on napping as much as I did need to on this route by myself. And so I think that you do end up feeling like you need to sleep a lot more if you are responsible for everything by yourself.
Right. Yeah. You're entire. There's no one looking out for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And there's no like pick me ups because there's there's not somebody every 20 miles who says, "Oh, hey, congratulations, you made it 20 miles," even though you're 80 miles from the end.
Yeah. Did you take like a GPS device or anything with you, or did you just have your phone?
I downloaded the Gaia app the day before, and that was all that I had. Now I have a Garmin InReach, and I'm more prepared for doing routes like this than I was at the time.
Right. Yeah. Do you have anything long like this on your list for this summer?
Well, right now I don't think that any of us get to have
I'm still
like that.
Be hopeful.
No, I did get to do the Issy Alps 100 and Fat Dog last year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what this year brings.
Totally, for sure. Some urban adventures, if nothing else.
Exactly. Although I'm not sleeping on the sidewalk.
It's way more dangerous than the forest.
Yeah. Even in my emergency bivvy.
That's good. Well, if no one else has any questions, I will stop recording everything.